Hi everyone. In this short video, I want to talk to you a little bit about the different types of sources that you'll encounter and may use in how they can help you in the research process. To begin with, it's important to recognize that different sources can do different things for us. They provide us with different levels of knowledge, we could say. So, in this, we can think of this diagram here as not only presenting the circumference of our knowledge, but also imagine that these are of different depths, that we're drilling this hole down as well. So for instance, with sources like reference resources, textbooks or encyclopedias or dictionaries, we gain a very broad understanding of a topic, but it's also quite shallow. So if we don't know what a word is, we might look it up in a dictionary and it certainly can tell us a broad definition, but exactly what it means might be kind of escaping us. It's a great place to start, especially if you're unfamiliar with terminology or generally just don't know about a topic at all. But most of us, if we're really interested in developing a deeper understanding, have to dig down a bit more. So sources such as like popular press sources, newspapers, or magazines, they start to give us a little bit more depth, a little bit more meaning to the topic area, even while still maintaining a pretty broad set of generalizations. So for instance, a well-written newspaper article or magazine article might give us a little bit more background information, help to put a topic a little bit into context, and also give us more of the social interest with that story. Like, why do people care about it? So in both of those situations, these kinds of sources provide us with a little bit more in-depth meaning in terms of why a broad audience might care about it and how it fits it broadly into some kind of background, time frame, or context. We can dig even deeper, however, and in the research process we would want to. When we get to the level of, say, trade magazines, we are reading material that is focused on a topic from a practitioner perspective or even beginning to develop expertise. Those kinds of sources lack something in the breadth of these other two sources. For instance, they may utilize very specialized vocabulary that not everyone would understand, but because they're not written for everyone. But what they give up in breadth, they gain in depth. So they can really dive into and give us a more in-depth, a more complex perspective on the meaning of a topic. So one example I use is my sister is a nurse. She gets a magazine about nursing life, and they have advertisements for specific kind of equipment or instruments that nurses might use, and they have stories in there about different sort of techniques that might be used in different situations or controversies that apply to, the workplace, the hospital as a workplace or something like that. Obviously, most people probably are not all that interested in that, and it takes a certain level of background to even really know why you might care about that. But you can certainly see that it starts to be presented for practitioners and experts. When we dig down even a little deeper, we get to the level of scholarly sources. These are articles written in academic journals or books published by university presses. And the audience on this is even smaller still. Beyond just being written for people who are, actively engaged in a particular employment area, these start to be written specifically for people who care about doing research on this topic. So for those who might be interested in, well, how did you collect this information? Or, what methodologies did you use? How are you analyzing that data? And so when we are in academia, are engaged in a research research process. It is this level of depth that we're trying to get to. The important thing to understand is that we can't just jump into this bubble without getting hurt, so to speak. We need to kind of enter into this process by going through these different levels. So when you're engaged in the research process, it's actually useful to think about how different sources might help you to get to these different places. So as steps that help you do different things at different places in the research process is another way we can think about the types of sources you might use. So before you even begin writing, or even your major research, you might be engaging in the process of defining a problem or choosing a topic. And in those situations, you are really looking for that broad background knowledge. I call them reference resources. They're also sometimes called tertiary sources, encyclopedias, but also popular press. Just how can I build just a foundation of knowledge about what I'm interested in to get me started? After you have that sort of broad background and foundation, you start to move into what we might call the literature review. All right. Now that I kind of have a pretty good sense of what my topic is, how can I find out what other experts and researchers know about this topic? In that area, I'm going to rely largely on what we might term secondary sources, sources that provide a kind of overview. I'm largely going to draw from scholarly research. Trade magazines could also fit in here as well. They help to give me an idea of what other experts who are working within a certain field might think about a topic or why they might care about it. Once I've sort of written my literature review, then I am moving into the realm of researcher. I am ready to sort of define my own research question and begin to try to answer it. And in order to be able to do that, to try to answer that question, I am going to collect data and evidence. That means I'm going to start looking for primary sources. So primary sources is where I basically get that kind of first-hand information that I might use to do analysis. On occasion, I might still use secondary sources here if there already is a ton of data on my topic that I can draw from for a new analysis. I might not have to collect anything new. But for most of you, you probably will end up having to go out and do that primary source data collection. That can be through the process of interviewing individuals or creating focus groups, running a survey, analyzing, or participating in observations or analyzing, like grabbing specific TV programs or images or newspaper articles, whatever that you pull together that you're going to use in your analysis as part of this process of finding primary sources. And then the final step in the research process that you'll engage in is that analysis and that discussion. You'll be working to interpret the primary sources that you found in relationship to these other conversations that you've already learned about, particularly this one. This is where you really get to take everything you've learned and build your own reflections based on the knowledge that you have gained. And in this process, you'll find all of this is important, right? It's the place where you can kind of connect these dots. But in particular, it's the place where you'll take the primary materials that you have collected and start to think about, well, what do these mean in relationship to these kind of scholarly and expert conversations that I'm now part of and that I know about? So it's really important. I think it's helpful to sort of understand how reference or secondary literature might help you better understand an expertise conversation using scholarly literature and trade magazines, how both of those are going to be useful to you as you collect your own data in terms of analyzing that overall. When you have a sense of that as the process, I think you're better able to find those sources that will help get you to this end place.